Okay. Why is it? Let's see what's happening. I only have one PowerPoint opening. Why am I? Okay, here it is. Alrighty. Okay, let me move up to the current slide. I don't think I'm sharing at this moment. Am I correct? I'm not sharing?
Not yet. It might come up in a minute.
Okay, so I'm trying to get it in the slide rule while we're waiting. Keep going up.
You're sharing now.
Oh, I am? Oh, okay.
Yes.
So here you go. That's funny because it doesn't even look like I'm sharing to me. Okay, so just start off with just to go over just a little bit. We left off last time talking about the crisis cycle. And now we're just talking about, these are a couple of steps. I'm sure most of you already know these steps, but I'm just putting them in here for people who might be new, how to respond to a crisis. And so one of the things is about establishing rapport and about listing behaviors or qualities that are necessary to manage the family that you're working with, to manage the child, to manage the relationship between the parent and the child. Okay, what is a crisis? It's how it's identified by the family. They're the ones to tell us what the crisis is. I do want people to be mindful when you are talking about a crisis and you're getting the caregiver's perspective of the crisis. You have to have the youth perspective. It gets real easy to go into a home and hear the parent's perspective of what's going on, and asking the youth to tell you what their experience is, but we also need to hear what their perspective is, what's going on. We need to identify questions that are helpful in identifying a crisis. And so again, what has worked and what hasn't worked is what comes up next, so that we can find out what are the strengths, the skills, supports, and resources to assist in de-escalation. And we need to know if people are having a challenge that they're going through at that time. Have they experienced this challenge before, and how were they able to manage it? That will allow you to know if there is a resource that was available in the past that's not available now. That might be something that you might have to work on. Or if there's a person or action, or if somebody able to do something different. Then when you respond to it, then you have to create that family care plan. And in that family care plan, you have to be both reactive and proactive interventions. What happens a lot of times when people create a plan that they give to the family to help them in case of a crisis should arise, they tend to only put on the plan services or intervent services for the family call. So if you're struggling and things go on awry, call us. Or if you're struggling and things are going awry, take the child to emergency. Or if it's a danger to self and others, then we need to call the police. Those things really, really need to be in the plan. However, if you want the family to learn how to manage those situations themselves, you have to give them things that each person in the family can do. And we'll come and talk more about that later. I'm just trying to give you a way to think about it. So if a child, for example, now move on, a child has run away and he had siblings. Maybe the siblings can call, can text, they can talk to their parents about where the child thinks they're going. The parent can look for the child. Those are things you need to give the family something to do. So they'll have uh, things that they could engage in before they call you. Those are kind of what we call reactive strategies, things that they can do if something actually occurs. Now, proactively, now we're putting interventions in the services. So now we're going to teach them how to interact with each other as a way of the child not running away when feeling frustrated or whatever. But we need to have both of those in the plan. If both of those are not in the plan, you will always get the call. and the families are not learning to do something different. The last thing we need to do when we respond to a crisis is plan for transition to appropriate level of care. And so the word I use transition, I don't use the word discharge. I use the word transition because that is movement. The family may still be connected to some type of services, so we call it transition. If a person has to go to a higher level of care, we have to talk to the family about what they need. Lower level of care, we have to talk about what resources and supports can we put in place. Even if if they stay at the same level and we move them to a new therapist, we have to talk about some of the fears or the expectations they may have. So this is how we respond to a crisis in general. So now, my question for my first question is, what differentiates an adult crisis response from a youth and child crisis response? So aside, I would just like you to put them into breakout groups. You don't have, you can put, you don't have, it can be a larger group, 5 people in the group, if that many. I forgot how many people we have, but like to split them in half. And when you go into the crisis, when you go into the breakout session, I want you to talk about, identify what are the differences that you think are the differences between an adult response and a child and youth response, and then pick somebody to come back and to share it with the group. And so we're going to give you just, not going to be a long discussion, about 5 minutes to talk about what do you think differentiates an adult crisis response from a child and youth crisis response. And I want you to brainstorm, so you might come up with some answers in.
All right. I am gonna
Okay.
send everybody off to small group.
Hello.
Hello.
Leave. Okay. Did it, Luam, did it work?
No, it did not. I had to sign back in. So next time, don't do that.
I had that feeling. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. So, in your groups, what did we actually come up with? Because I do have some things that we need to. What were some of the things that you actually came up with that differentiated adults from children?
I can go for my group first. When you first asked that question, I was sitting there thinking like about behavioral responses. And my first thought was like children have a tendency more to like lash out and start yelling and throwing things. But then I thought about the work that I've done with adults, and I'm like, oh, well, just kidding. Adults actually have a tendency to do that too. Um, but two of the main differences that we discussed was a lot of the times the adult can describe what they were feeling. They can connect like the trigger to the feelings to their response, whereas a child really has a difficult time doing that. And then another thing with children is that there is always an adult involved and they have like a family influencing their crisis as well.
Thank you. So, okay. Luam from our group.
Yes, so we discussed communication. Communication being that the adult is able to communicate verbally, what their needs are. Oftentimes, if they are calling the crisis line, they are asking for help for themselves. Um, whereas a child will not, and there might be, well, same thing what Ashley said, that there might be other contributors for the child. It could be a family conflict with parents. It could be something else going on. Um, there is that, and they may not be able to communicate with us as to what they're feeling or what's going on. And being part of that could be just where they are developmentally as well. Um, and adults have more autonomy, so we are able to make our own decisions and what works for us. We're more independent, which can influence that as well, whereas kids, we tell them what to do. um Anyways, treatment wise as well was something else that we discussed. A lot of times when the adults do call, it means they are seeking, help. So they are open to that treatment, whereas the child may not be. So even if we make any sort of referrals, the parents could say, yes, we're happy. Youth may not want to participate, or it could be the other way around, where, obviously we need consent. Parents don't consent to that treatment, but you see that there is a need for that help, for that intervention. And I think that's about it.
Okay. Anybody else have anything else they'd like to share that maybe we haven't discussed so far?
The only thing from our group that we haven't already talked about was just kind of the difference between adults and children and their overall ability to cope with crises. I feel like we notice this pattern with adults that they're typically able to mask for not able to find better words right now, but mask through their crisis and use like coping mechanisms and skills that they have acquired along the way to get them through, whether that's functional or not. They kind of get themselves through until it gets to where they really, really need help. And it's usually a big deal for them and for everybody around them. And then for children, they're maybe not so aware of like the impact of everything going on around them and not aware of the impact on their functionality in their everyday life, and they haven't had the opportunity to build up those coping mechanisms and skills to get them through. So we kind of see it is really easily just like one thing, but it's building up over time still, and it's easier to implement those skills and coping mechanisms into them because they just really don't have any knowledge of it off the bat.
Marley, that's wonderful information you just shared. Thank you. Anybody else have anything else they would like to share? So here are a few things also that I want you to be mindful of. That okay, let's see. Let me see if I can share it. Let me know if it's sharing, because I can't see it sharing. It doesn't look like it's sharing to me. Hold on.
It's not sharing right now.
I know I could see it, even though I tried. It didn't share. Hold on. One more time. Let's see it here. Why is this so difficult? Okay, here you go. All right. So usually let me go back into the slide point. This is driving me crazy.
We can see it, yeah. It's sharing.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it go in slideshow. Go back up. So adults can usually identify their challenge. And many of the times the adult is the person who is actually experiencing the challenge when they come out. And they can determine who is involved and who is to receive the information. You know, the adult makes all that decisions. They can make their own decisions, and that when we are connected with them, we should engage in a culturally, humbly, linguistically competent manner. We have to be mindful of that. And that falls to the part of just acceptance where they are. With a youth and with the caregiver, that's the challenge. However, we might have young people that can call in for themselves. Here's the one thing that we have to be real mindful of is that children are not small adults. So our expectations cannot be, and we cannot treat them as adults, especially this is where we have the tendency to switch over in their teen years, because they're acting out, they're speaking, they're demanding a voice. Many times people expect them to, again, reason and act as if they're small adults, and they're not. So we have to always be mindful of that. When we're working with children, we have to consider both the caregiver and the child. And we have to also be mindful of the context of their relationship. How are they getting along with each other? What is contributing to what they are experiencing? All those questions have to come into mind. When we're working with them, we have to maintain alliances with both the caregiver and the child. We cannot, and if other family members, if they're involved, we cannot take sides, because that stops the work from being done. One, because we are doing this work from a family perspective, not from an individual perspective. That's the real big difference in the child and the adult and child. When we're working with a child or a youth, it's always working with their parents. I've seen so many times that people say, this is the person I got the call about being the youth, and we only want to work with the youth. That cannot be done for this program to be successful. Family members are mutually connected and mutually influential. So if you only work with one, that might create more challenges along the way. The family member, the caregiver, needs to actually know what it is that you're working on with their child. And if there's a skill that you're teaching the child, you need to teach it to the caregiver. And so we know that we have to always engage with people in a culturally humble and linguistically competent way. All right. So here are some common mental health challenges that you will see when you're responding to crisis. Problems getting along with peers or adults. Inability to control anger or aggression. Inability to manage worries, troubling thoughts, or feelings. Not being able to pay attention or focus. Feeling sad or worthless. School refusal or challenges. Engaging in risky or self-injurious behavior. Inability to cope with significant losses, traumas, and other difficulties related to the child's mood, behavior, thoughts, and relationships and traumas. So these are some of the ways that the things that we will see that will show up in the work that we do. So some things that I want you to look at is here, and I'm going to send this to you. Here are some things that parents might say when they're calling and they're presenting their child to on the call. And they might not come up with the diagnosis on the side, but this is actually how they might respond. My child doesn't speak or look at me or doesn't want to engage. He won't listen or respond to me. He freaks out if we don't do our usual schedule changes, doesn't play or show any interest in others. And I really should have made this as a quiz. Does weird stuff with toys instead of playing with them, just want to swing a rock. So this would be a child that maybe is exhibiting some outward symptoms of autism. Okay, it's not all inclusive. All of these things could actually be symptoms of other challenges that are going on, but typically many of these responses would be connected with a youth with autism. So here's somebody that has anxiety, won't go outside, worries about everything, won't be apart from me, wants to know where I am, describes having bad dreams every night and comes to my room. This child is having some type of anxiety that we need to look at. Next one, doesn't think before doing dangerous or foolish things, refuses to listen to me and what I asked them to do, runs in the streets and jumps off of high places. So we're talking about that impulsivity, that's reacting and responding without thinking. Could be attention deficit disorder. So as we go on down this room, communication is stuttering, gets into fights with peers today because of misunderstanding. There you go. Another one is stealing, vandalizing. All of these behaviors will show up. And sometimes, because again, I was listening to, I think it was Luam in the group, who was talking about her and Samara, who were talking about children who are undiagnosed. Parents may see these behaviors and not understand the diagnosis either. So here again are some things that would allow us to know maybe this is what's going on. Because when we go into a home, we have to try to understand what we're seeing in front of us. For some of us, it is not our job to make the diagnosis, but to have an understanding what might be presenting. So some possible presentations or symptoms that I'm giving you here to give you an idea of what a parent may be experiencing and how you can help to think about the symptoms that you're seeing, because then you can learn how to work and deal and manage with different disorders. Any questions? Anybody ever see all these behaviors? And parents don't, they sometimes parents will talk about these behaviors using this language and not knowing the other language that is needed to define what is going on. I want you to know that 75% of the youth that we're working with develop behavioral health conditions prior to adulthood. And it can be ongoing. And that teen years is probably years for a lot of onset of some of the mental health challenges that will carry on into adult years. So things can pop up. You know, sometimes people have a diagnosis and it shows up early in childhood. Other times it will happen again in the teen years. And then again, for others, it will happen in early adulthood. So most of them show up before we reach that adulthood. So we need to be mindful that some of the behaviors that when parents say he's been fine for all this time, it could be the onset of a mental health disorder. What we have to learn to do as people who are working in support families is to discern between typical developmental behaviors and symptoms. We need to know, is this something that would be typical for a 17-year-old to be experiencing, or is there something that's a little different that we need to pay more attention to and see if there is some mental health disorder that's in the process or onset that's coming on at that time. So, as crisis responders, we need to be aware how youth may describe their symptoms compared to adults. And that's why I gave you that list. So not only may a parent use these type of symptoms, presentations and symptoms, youth might even talk about, these are the things that I'm experiencing and I don't know how to manage it. Okay. Questions or comments around that? So just something to think about when we work with young children. Young children engage in magical thinking. They believe if they think about something long enough that it will happen, and that their thinking might help to create change. They believe their thoughts, wishes, and fears have the power to become real, and it can make things happen. The other thing we need to know is that young children are less able to anticipate danger. So they don't know how to keep themselves safe and are particularly vulnerable to other people taking advantage of them. And the last thing we need to really think about, that children have a tendency to blame themselves for others. They kind of feel like they're omnipotent. Everything revolves around them. And so they have some type of power and control in all types of situations. And you will see this occur when parents are having conflict. A youth might feel that they have been a part of the conflict. So if their parents are not getting along, they may attribute their parents not getting along to something they have done. If their parents are fighting over money, they might have said, Dad, I shouldn't have asked for those sneakers. If I wouldn't have asked for those sneakers, my parents wouldn't be fighting. So we have to be real mindful of how a child can actually blame themselves, and this can go on for a long time, for being the causes of many of the challenges that their parents are experiencing. And so as we put all of this together, I'm going to start talking about a crisis intervention model that we're going to use for today. So the crisis intervention model, there are like 7 steps to this crisis intervention model. This was created by Albert Roberts. And the one is the lethality. The second step is rapport. The third step is precipitating event. The fourth step is active listening and validation. The fifth step is coping alternatives. The sixth step is crisis plan. And the seventh is follow-up and transition. Now, this is about how we actually go and approach the crisis. One, we start off with a risk assessment, and that's just going in and learning what could cause harm to the people that we're supporting. So we can determine what precautions we should take or what should we do to prevent harm. The aim is to make sure that no one gets help. So when we are doing a risk assessment, how does this actually show up in your work? Questions. When you are first engaging with someone, how does a risk assessment from your perspective, and we could talk about it with using tools, or we could talk about personal things that we do when we're assessing risk. How does it show up in your work? And that is a question.
We do like the safety questions, and if there's a youth that is known to be aggressive, then I get with, people they don't know as well as family, then we bring another responder and we'll have 2 responders there. Yeah, so that's part of the
Your
risk
risk assessment.
assessment.
Thank you, Coco. Someone else?
So like Coco was saying, before we even go out, we do that risk assessment. But once I get there, I start like talking with the youth and building rapport. And I ask a lot of like sneaky questions that are like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I do want to know what they want to be when they grow up, but I also want to know that they have plans for their future. And then if there is like developmental like concerns that come with that, like, oh, you don't really like know what you want to be when you grow up. Okay. Like, what are you looking forward to next month or this week? And if it's like they're not looking forward to anything, well, then maybe jumping into a more formal assessment of suicidality.
Okay, so thank you. So you're going to report and then you're assessing what they feel is important and what needs you might have to address. Okay. Anybody else? Risk assessment. We all have to conduct them. Anybody else? How do you assess for risk?
I think sometimes it makes a difference if you been called out because they are suicidal. Once you get there, obviously, you look at body language, so they'll be more withdrawn a lot of the time. So body language, as well as we use the Columbia risk assessment. So I will go through that with them, and being called because of suicidality and suicide concerns, I address it more head on. If it is something that I would prefer to cover before I leave, ensuring safety, then I would do what Ashley does, their history of, have you ever attempted suicide? Do you engage in any self-injurious behaviors or any other recklessness that they may be doing?
Okay, somebody else. Thank you, Luan. Someone else? Ashley and Luan. What do you assess when you do a risk assessment? What are you checking for? Anybody? Go ahead.
To mirror what everybody said, I go through all of it. I ask about their suicidality. I ask about their aggression. I ask, even though it's not directly towards them, I'm asking about some protective factors or things that might influence their decisions. If they're impulsive, if they're getting their needs met, things like that. It's kind of like an ongoing process that culminates towards the end, what their overall risk is and whatnot.
Okay, thank you, Joshua. Anybody else?
I have something to add that's a little bit different than everybody else. I guess I do a little bit more of the rapport building, and then I take that into like asking them about their personal life and their perspective of what's going on in a deeper level by asking like what their interests are. So like I'm pretty young, and I'm always looking for like those internet and social media risk factors as well. So like a lot of our youth are into Roblox and Fortnite and all sorts of different social media and gaming. So I ask them a lot about that and get into their brain, and it feels like it builds rapport, makes them open, and then I can ask some specific questions about like, what kind of things are you seeing? What kind of things are you engaging in? What kind of experiences have you had already? And then assess risk that way.
Thank you, Marley. Anyone else? What about the environment?
I currently don't do crisis work, but when I think about risk assessment, I think about safety, and then biosocial cycle with the family or with the youth that I will be working with, so that I can get the whole idea of what is happening, and then what are their perception of what their safety looks like for them.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone talk about the environment that you're in? The risks of the environment. Location. Where in the house what location is the most risky when you're in the house?
In the kitchen.
In the kitchen. Exactly. So risk environment. What else could be a risk while in the house?
I personally find bedrooms, especially if they're small, they can be kind of risky. You don't want to block the door but you don't want your back to them or against the door. It's like you kind of have to be really cautious on how you position yourself, because you don't want them to feel trapped. And I just find that sometimes in small bedrooms, that can be kind of like something that I really watch out for.
Thank you. So I want us, when we think about those risks, we have to take all of those things keep those things in mind when we're actually working with someone. What are the risks going on when we walk into the room? Are there emotional risks that we need to be mindful of? Is someone feeling suicidal? Is someone feeling hopeless and lost? Are there physical risks that we have to be mindful of? Is this a place that I feel safe for my own self and for the youth that I'm actually supporting along the way? Is there emotional safety within our relationship that's going on? Does this person feel comfortable talking to me? And does this environment seem like a place that this child feels safe within? What is their relationship like with the family members that they have? All of those are risk assessments that we have to conduct before we sometimes get involved into formal risk assessments, which might be your Columbia, which might be your crisis assessment tool. Okay? Just want to share that. Going to move us back into our PowerPoint. Please tell me, am I sharing? No. Why is
Not
this?
yet. No.
I don't know why I keep pushing share and it doesn't work. Share again. Okay, here we go. Let's do it one more time. Share again. Oh, I should give you all this to share and let me do it. Okay, hold on. Next time. So again, we have to be, am I sharing now?
Yes.
Okay, so the next thing I talk about is developing rapport. And it's a relationship characterized by agreement and mutual understanding or empathy that makes communication possible or easy. What leads to rapport is engagement. So when you are working with someone, here are the 3 things in engagement that the individual needs to know about you. Who are you? What? And not just who you are, that I'm a response worker, but something about you that allows them to make a connection. The next question would be is, can I trust you? Do I have the relationship and connection with you to trust you? We all know that when someone actually comes into the home and responds, that the child and family recognize that they have to give you some level of information. But to get to the heart of the process, to learn what really is going on, we have to answer these questions. So, can I trust you? Do I feel safe with you? And what are we supposed to do together? Why are you here? What is supposed to happen? So these are the 3 questions that you need to share at some level with the individual that you're supporting. As we get to work with the child, we have to learn what was at the heart that triggered the crisis in the first place. And so when we talk about triggers, we talk about slow and fast triggers. And triggers are things that could actually cause the crisis to occur. And what I would like people to know is that triggers can be influenced by several things, and many of those things all coming through our senses. So triggers can be caused by seeing something. Triggers can be caused by hearing something. Triggers can be caused by touch. Triggers can be caused by position. Triggers can be caused by lack of movement. Triggers can be caused by hearing. And which one did I say? And triggers can be caused by smell. All of those things can trigger behaviors to occur. But there are other things that actually get involved. So when we're working with someone, we need to know the difference between a slow trigger and a fast trigger. So a slow trigger are things that are going on in the background that might be happening over a period of time. And that trigger starts before the challenging behavior appears. What happens when people are triggers, they don't feel at their best. So here are some examples of what a slow trigger might be. I'm not feeling well. So if I'm not feeling well, if someone said something to me that normally or typically I would be able to respond to or even ignore, because I'm not feeling well, I might respond negatively right away. Feeling tired or not sleeping well is a slow trigger. Having nothing to do for a long period of time can be a slow trigger. So even though today I'm acting up, I might have been triggered for this thing might have been going on for a period of time. Good example of being bored or having nothing to do for a long period of time. A child goes to school and the teacher is not giving them work that actually keeps them excited, keeps them motivated, or keeps them involved. Over a period of time, the first day the child might sit there and do the work, but over a period of time, they might start to act out because they've been bored with where they are for that period of time. So that would be a slow trigger. Being hungry can be a slow trigger. Not having anyone pay attention to you can be a slow trigger. So slow triggers usually are connected with time and not happening right away. Then there are fast triggers, and fast triggers usually have a immediate effect and occur much closer to the observed behavior, the response that you see. So a fast trigger can be ignored. Some people just don't like being ignored. Trigger them right away. Being told to do something they don't know how to do, that could be a fast trigger. Having an event canceled or not being able to do something that they were expecting to do. Being told no or fast triggers. Now we can have slow triggers, we can have fast triggers, we can also have a combination of a fast and slow trigger that can cause people to act out. So a combination of a fast and slow trigger may be that over time, I have wanted to spend time with my mother, and I haven't been able to spend time with my mother. That's something that I've been wanting to do for a long period of time. Today, she comes home and she actually ignores me again. So now, the desire to spend time with my mother, which is a slow trigger and that's been seething under the bottom for a long period of time, today she comes home and she ignores me again. That becomes the antecedent for me starting to act out. So a slow trigger and a fast trigger together can cause a reaction right away. And we have to find out when we're working in a crisis whether this has been a slow trigger or a fast trigger or a combination of both. We also need to know triggers can be brought on by mental health challenges. It can be brought on by developmental intellectual challenges. All of those things can contribute to and be triggering for an individual along the way. So here is something that we're going to work on, and we're going to talk about it. So triggers can be biological. They can all be about how I, connected to my body. And I'll give one. Biological would be sick. Emotional, they could be connected to how I'm feeling and what I'm going through. Triggers can be connected to social experiences, and they can also be connected to the environment. I want you to look at this list, and I'm not going to put it in the breakout groups. I'm just going to ask you we can do it together. Look at this list. Down the bottom, frustration, small space, lack or loss of choice, personal power, lack of sleep, sick, isolation, no friends, lack of dignity. What place would you put each of these situations? So if I asked you frustration, would that be biological, emotional, social, or environmental as a trigger?
Emotional?
Okay. What would be a small space be as a trigger?
Environmental?
What would be loss of power, personal power? Where would we stick that one?
I feel like that could be emotional and or social.
I'm glad someone said that. Okay, because it could be emotional that I don't have any control and power within my own, but also if I'm in my group, I don't have power. That can make a difference. Okay, how about, okay. I'm going to go over some of them. How about rejection?
Emotional or social, like depending on friend group stuff or bullying.
Emotional, not feeling like I belong. Okay. How about the room stinks?
I'd go with environmental.
Environmental. Along, okay. How about developmental disability?
Biological.
Okay. What did you say? I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Biological.
Oh, biological. Okay. All right. How about not feeling respected? That's a big one that a lot of youth will work with. That's a big one. Not feeling respected.
Emotional, because you put the word feeling. I don't feel right emotional.
Okay, how about no friends?
Social?
How about it's too noisy?
Environmental.
It would be environmental. Okay. How about this one didn't I do yet. Ooh, let's see. Isolation.
I feel like that could be environmental or social.
Anybody have one that's not on here? That would be in biological.
Physical pain.
Physical pain. How about another one?
A disability.
A disability. Okay, let's give one for emotional.
Tired?
Tired. Okay. How about another one? Where would depression go?
Could that be biological too, minus emotional?
Yep, because depression is a, okay. All right. Other social challenges.
Maybe peer pressure.
Peer pressure. Okay, another environmental challenge.
Like lack of resources.
Lack of resources. Where would the community go?
Environmental or social.
Environmental. And we have to look at all of these different areas when we are actually talking to someone, because each one of these areas can trigger one thing and set off a trigger in another. Okay? Questions or comments? Where are we going? I'm not, I showed that before. Here are some other things that we have to be mindful of when we're working with youth and their family. That the caregiver, and I'm going to talk about the caregiver when I talk about this for a minute, that caregivers can be in different states of grief. And depending on what state of grief they're in, might affect their ability or inability to respond to the work that you're coming in to support their children. So if I'm a parent and I'm in denial of my child's behavior, I might act a certain way. So if my child has a diagnosis and I am not ready to accept the diagnosis, I might be in denial of the diagnosis. And as a result of me being in that denial, I might not participate in interventions and treatment as people expected me, because I believe the causation of my child's behavior is not connected to the diagnosis, but it's connected to something else. So in fact, if my child is experiencing some type of depression and they're not following through or doing anything that they are told, I might start to see that they're just engaging in willful behavior, that they might be just being lazy. Okay. And so my ability to say, okay, I need treatment. No, they might say, no, he just needs a kick in the butt. He just needs to be able to follow directions or whatever. That's my state of denial. Now, when I start as I learn a little bit more about what is going on with my child, I might then start to get anxious about what's going on, and I feel some anxiety. When I'm experiencing anxiety, the anxiety might be getting me geared up and ready to do the work. But it doesn't mean that I'm really in a place where I'm able to do the work. I'm just gearing up for the task. And that's the anxiety that you might see me coming to you when we're engaging in a relationship, because I have a need to maybe understand more. Another state that I might be in is fear. Is fear of not knowing what to do and how to manage what is going on in front of me. So as parents, we many times want to be able to manage the challenges that our children are experiencing, but when we don't know what to do, many times parents respond from a place of fear, of not knowing what to do, not understanding what it is to do, and believing that if they try something again, they might fail as they have in the past. So that's another state that they could be in. And then here we come to this whole place of guilt. And many parents feel responsible for some of the challenges that their children have experienced, especially if that challenge may have come as a result of something they believe that they have done. So if I have a child who has a developmental disability, I might feel really guilty about things that led up to my child having that disability when in fact they've had no control over that at all. So parents might start to think about, well, like a mother might say, when I was pregnant, if I would have not drank, and that might be a truth, but she didn't know I didn't drink, or if I would have been more positive about being pregnant, that my child wouldn't have experienced what they're experiencing now. So guilt can be a large part of what a caregiver is experiencing also. And that guilt sometimes can keep people stuck. We have to be mindful of that too. Then there's the next state of depression. Okay, and that whole state of depression, we need to know that depression is not only a feeling of not being able to do something and not being able to engage and not being able to move forward, but depression also can have physical symptoms connected to it. The isolation, the loneliness, also there might be some pain and inability to move and do things and move forward. So parents can be in that stage also. And then there's the stage of anger. That they're really upset. This shouldn't have happened to me. And that anger for some may help people to move forward, but that anger for others can keep them in the same state that they're in. We call these states because people can move throughout the states. They don't go in a circular motion as you see here. They can go back and forth. They can move forward. They can move backwards. They can go sideways. These states can occur over and over again in people's lives. So again, if I have a child who may have experienced Down syndrome as a baby, long as they're a baby and they're at home, I've learned to manage those feelings around the Down syndrome. But the moment now I have to take the child and put them into healthcare, all that anxiety, all that fear, all of that anger may resurface again because I have some fears about my child going back, my child now entering into a new environment, and how are things going to work for my child? Is my child going to be different from all the other children that's in the place? Are the people going to respond differently to my child? Are they going to know how to interact and treat my child? So the anxiety may come up again. I might even get some depression. I might feel some guilt. All of things could happen. Now my child has successfully made it through daycare, and now she's going to school. Again, the fears may re-arise again. They might be different fears, but they all may I might start to experience those same feelings all over again. And this can happen at every developmental stage along the way. So you might, and the other thing we need to be mindful of is that if you have two parents in the household, two caregivers in the household, one parent may be in one state and another parent may be in another state, and that causes a great deal of conflict within the families. We need to know children who have developmental mental health challenges have a higher degree of divorce rate with their parents because of their inability to successfully deal with the challenge together. So we have to be mindful that when you walk in, one person might be in one state and another person might be in another. So one parent might still be in a space of denial, and another parent might be in a place of fear, but in that place of fear, they're willing to take action and do something to support the child along the way. When we are engaging in the work that we do, we have to be mindful of how we and how the family interprets the behavior that they see in front of them actually drives the intervention that they feel will be helpful. Okay? So, for example, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute because sometimes how we interpret what is going on is how we respond to a youth. And that's from our perspective and from the parent's perspective. If a parent has a child that is not going to school and following up and doing school assignments and following through in school with the things that they're supposed to do. If a parent sees that individual as lazy and the one parent sees that individual as lazy, then their whole mindset about correcting that situation might come from a place of punishment. Okay? It might come from a place of we need to take things away. If a parent comes from a place that there might be something going wrong, that this child is not able to manage a skill that's in front of them, they might come from a place of how can we build and create skills. So how we interpret behavior makes a big difference in what interventions or what strategies we create for the individual that we're supporting. That also can be the same mindset that we have to be mindful when we respond to a family that's in a crisis. If we go into a home and we interpret the crisis, and although we know that the family is the one that tells us what the crisis is, how we interpret the crisis can also be challenging from our perspective. For example, many times when we go into homes and we work with families and we meet with the caregiver and the youth, and we have to take some time to meet with the caregiver and the youth alone for a few minutes. Several caregivers can always say, I want to be present when you're having the intervention, especially with a youth under 12. They have a right to be there through the entire process. But if we can, we need to be able to have, for especially with youth a little older, need to be able to have sometimes to talk to the youth alone to hear their perspective, because their perspective and their parents' perspective of what's driving the challenge that we're seeing in front of us may be completely different. So we have that. Based on how the parent responds to us when we come into the home can actually cause us to look at things through a different lens. For example, we work with a parent, we come to a home, and we meet a parent that's very anxious, very angry, hard to make connection with. Sometimes we have a tendency to look at that parent as being the reason for the child's behavior. If we go into a home and we work with a child who is very calm, but is really struggling, that child's response to us may reinforce how we look at the parent. And so what do? We may plan based on the response that we got from the parent in a way that doesn't support both of them getting the work that they need done. And we always have to come from a place when we're doing this work, that we preserve relationships with both the child and the parent. Both people have to be connected. So we have to be mindful when we go into homes and parents are highly expressive in their feelings and unable to be calm, that could just be something that they're experiencing, and not let that be the way we decide we're going to create the intervention, because how people respond to us sometimes affects how we intervene with others.
Denise, I want to chime in. I know I don't want to disrupt
Yes.
you, but I have a good situation when I was in Ohio of a call from a school. Of a 16, I think she was 15 or 16 years old, has shared with the school some disturbing messaging about suicidal ideation, and they were really concerned about the well-being of this child. And as we responded, I was supervising a team. There were 3 of us that went to a home. The 2 sets of parents were there, the dad and the mom. And then the mom seemed really panicked of what was told about her daughter's situation. The mother was already planning in the course of 2 hours since this was told to the mother. The mother was already trying to purchase a ticket for her daughter to get treatment someplace outside of the US. This is an immigrant, a Somali family, and she was trying to send her daughter already to Turkey or some other places. So she was and the dad was kind of in denial. So you have 2 parents. One is in a panicked mode, the other one is in denial mode, and the staff felt if they addressed one, the other one felt that they were not listened to. So what are some strategies if you're working with the 2 set of parents in a home? At that moment, it wasn't even the child anymore, because the parents were kind of tearing each other apart, of saying like, you're not supporting, the reason why our child is saying this is because of you're too weak to support, or the other person. So how do you, at that moment, as you're trying to build rapport, when you kind of feel like you're in the middle of a firestorm or a firefight between the 2 sets of parents, rather than even dealing with the child?
Okay, so when you're in the middle of 2 sets of parents, that can be a very hard place to be. And sometimes you have to stop and ask, for me, a time to actually sit and have a calm discussion between the 2 of them. Sometimes that discussion can be together, where you're listening to both sides and hearing each other's perspective. Other times you may have to separate the 2 to have a conversation and let them know that after you hear the 2 different perspectives, to bring them back together. Sometimes you cannot try to try to solve the conflict with 2 people that are on 2 opposing points right there together. Sometimes that work needs to be done separately. I would need to know, why does the mother feel that she needs to move on this behavior so quickly, and talk about maybe there's more information we need to learn and know. Just to give, because one, we have to make sure we hear that she's listening and find out why she is so ready to make an extreme move. Otherwise, we have to find out why the father is feeling the way he is feeling also, because both of those have relationships with that youth, and they might know something completely different about the youth based on their relationship. With that said, then we can talk about those things that we learned that are different, and we can talk about the things that they actually want that are similar. Because when you're working with people who have 2 opposing thoughts, you really have to get them to come to one place of interest. What do you really want for this child, and how can we work together to get this to work out without making quick, rash decisions? Because again, it might not be a quick, rash decision for the mother, because she may have been seeing this behavior escalate over time and not validating what her experience has been might, would not help either. Also, we have to understand and validate why the dad is feeling what he's feeling, but trying to get them to come together in a place of what is best for the individual. And I'm saying that in that situation where we're working with two parents that are struggling, because you're going to find a lot of that, especially within households, and don't add divorce or separation to the situation, because that adds another level. But also, that same experience can come when you start to provide interventions for the child, and people have different ideas about what needs to happen. We have to come to a place in the middle of what is best for the individual and have those conversations around that, but also respecting and validating each other's opinions. That's where we have to start with family members. How can we get you to at least work for the interests of the child? That's where I would start off with, and hearing those discussions, because people can be all over the place. I'm saying dad says he's lazy, mom says he needs help. And how can we get them to work in the middle, or come at least closer to the middle than they were beforehand? Any other questions or responses to that? Because that's the real struggle. They're in different places. They have different perspectives. How they would like the work to be done comes from two different places. We're coming in, and we have to make sure that we stay connected to both family members. And that's kind of hard, because we might even prefer to be on one side than the other. And when we show that we have a preference, we are going to lose the other family member involved. And this is where we have to really be mindful about cultural practices, and why would someone engage in that behavior in terms of wanting to send the child away so quickly or whatever. So the whole point of working with family members is hearing the whole story. That's why we have to take our time and hear the whole story and make those connections with all members in the group. And we have to learn to be comfortable in how people interact with each other, unless we find it to be a place where we feel unsafe, or unsafe for the family. We have to learn how to manage that. Any other questions about that? I do have some. Okay, I have some. What time is it? Oh, we got time. I'm trying to make sure. Drive interventions. So here we are. So my question is, okay, I'm not sharing. I can see that. You guys, next time I'm gonna have this down packed. I think this is, here we go. Come on. Okay. I am sharing now, correct? So why would someone experience a crisis? And here are some of the things that I came up with: feeling unsafe, not having a need met, someone makes a demand, escape, physical or mental illness, loss, developmental disability, or the environment. All of these things can actually contribute to a crisis. Many times when we talk about crisis, we always just look at what happened. Like, the kids were fighting, not following directions, being disrespectful. But as we learn more about what's going on, we need to come to what is at the source. What is really causing this crisis to occur? And so here are some things that we need to look at, and at a deeper level: feeling unsafe, not having a need met, making a demand. You know how many times children act out to avoid following a demand? that is made by their parents or request that is made by their parents, not wanting to do something, escape. So all of these things we need to come into mind. So, okay, here it goes. Let me move to the next one. So now we're going to go, well, I want to move. Okay. Here are some things situations that might be happening. I am not going to ask you to solve the situation. I'm going to ask you to do this a little different. What do you think may have been the underlying source of the crisis? What might have been going on in this experience that needs an intervention? So the first one, a youth has locked himself in his bedroom and refused to come out. Mom calls family response services. When you arrive, he says he doesn't want to talk to you and refuses to unlock his door. His parents are livid and are threatening to knock the door down. Now, if we go back, which one of these, feeling unsafe, not having a need met, someone making a demand, escape, physical or mental illness, loss, developmental disability, or the environment? Which of these do you feel could be contributing to a youth who's locked himself in the room, does not want to come out, and is refusing to talk to you? What do you think could be a cause for the crisis?
They might be feeling unsafe, or they potentially just need time away from their parents.
Okay, somebody, thank you. That's a good one. May feel unsafe and need time away from their parents. What else could be contributing to this? And we're just taking guess, but just, what might be happening? Why do you think someone would lock themselves in their room and then not want to talk to you?
Can you go back to the scenario for a second, Denise?
Oh, sure can.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, Esther. There you go. Youth has locked himself in their bed, refused to come out. When you arrive, he doesn't want to talk to you and refused to unlock the door. His parents are living or threatening to knock the door down. Let's go back so you can have it. What could
I
be
mean,
some?
it kind of sounds like someone is making a demand. The parents are trying to force him to come out of his room.
Mhm. Anyone else?
The environment in general.
It could
Right
talk to me
now,
about the environment. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, parents were there making demands, threatening to knock the door down, to get him out. And then all of a sudden there's this other stranger there also making a demand. Hey, I want to talk to you. Can you open the door? So the youth is in an environment where they do not feel safe or heard, where feelings are validated, where whatever the crisis may, or whatever, however they got to that point, the youth obviously has locked themselves away for a reason. So
Okay, so now my next question. What's our crisis intervention when we get there?
So I had this like almost exact situation happen. I got there and the youth locked herself in the room. And the reason was she felt unsafe. Her mom and herself got into like a physical altercation earlier in the day. So she didn't want to come out and talk with her mom. She didn't want to talk with me. So I talked with the mom, got background, and then I sat outside her door and said, "Hey, like I'm here if you want to talk. I'll sit here for 5 minutes. If you want to talk, open up." And she didn't for like 3 minutes. So I was like sitting there, I was like, "Oh, okay." And I wrote her a note and I passed it like under the door. And then she answered the question I asked her. So then I wrote another question and she answered that. And then we started like talking through the door. And she told me that she liked to make jewelry. Well, actually, Marlis had met with this client before, so I was like reading through her case note while I was sitting there. And in the note, Marlis said that she liked to make jewelry. So I asked her about that. And then I asked her, like, well, can I see the jewelry? And she's like, oh, yeah, and opened up the door. And then we went from there. Um, so sometimes, like, well, one thing I really like to do is just like set a timer, like, I'm gonna be here for 5 minutes, or like, just talk to me for 5 minutes. And if you feel like it's not helpful, then we can stop talking when the timer goes off. So that's something that I like to do if someone doesn't want to engage with me.
Okay. I gave that scenario because that's a very, very common one, to go into a home and the youth doesn't want to talk to you and that they've locked themselves in the room. And I love that your intervention was to slide notes under the door. I love that your intervention was to talk about something besides for what the crisis is, because when someone tells you they don't want to talk about something, it is not the time to keep pushing to make them talk about it. It's a waste of time to sit there and keep pushing, because the more adamant you are about pushing to talk about it, the more adamant they are about not talking about it. And it's also a sign that more relationship is needed. So thank you, Ashley, for coming up and giving me the whole scenario of what you did. I want to see anybody else. What intervention, what's another intervention that you could have done? Remember, family intervention, trying to give tips. What would you have done with the parents? Because it's more than just the kid that's going having a challenge right now.
I was gonna say, get the parents away. You know, tell them go, I don't know, in the backyard or a separate room or something, give each other some space. Let everyone, you know, cool off for a little bit. And then maybe discuss with the parents that it's very frustrating, yes, but maybe not making the youth feel unsafe may not be the best approach. When they've locked themselves away, you know, might be just giving them some space for a bit, or um, just any other preventions before things escalate to that degree. So work on things with parents of how they can prevent, not prevent, but how they can better deal with situations like that.
Anybody have any suggestions they would like to add? Okay, next scenario. I got 4 of them for us today to talk about. All right. Let's go. Let's go back. Minimize it again and hit the share. Here we are. Where did it go? Oh, move down. Why did it go way down here? Okay. So our next one. All right. There you go. The youth and his caregiver are involved in a verbal altercation that appears to be escalating. Both have started to use abusive language toward each other. The youth has stated that his parents never listen, so he doesn't have to listen to them. The caregiver is adamant that if he doesn't give him some respect, the youth will have to leave. Okay? Now, let's go again. Back to why would someone experience a crisis? What could be going on underneath the surface? And do I need to take us back to the scenario again, or youth and parents are in an argument, it's escalating, they're becoming verbally abusive to each other. What do you feel might be happening underneath the surface? What could be going underneath the surface?
Denise, did someone say not having a need met? Was that mentioned?
No one said any. Okay, not having the need met. Oh, okay, I didn't hear him. Okay, that could be it. Not having the need met. Talk to me a little bit about that, just a little bit.
So it sounds like they're not hearing each other. So if I'm telling you something and you're not hearing, then you're not hearing me. So there's a need that I'm trying to communicate and then you're not getting it.
Okay, thank you. Someone else? I can't hear you. For some reason, the voices, I can't hear y'all at all. Whoever was just talking, I couldn't hear you at all. What were you saying?
That was Coco. I think Coco is having some mic issue.
Oh, okay, because I couldn't hear at all. Anyone?
I think what she was saying is someone making a demand.
Might be making a demand.
That's what
Okay.
Coco was saying.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. Someone might be making a demand that the child doesn't want or that the child wants from the parent. Demands. We have to look at interactions are two ways. So it could be about making a demand. Anybody else? Put it back up.
There could be a developmental disability going on that's impacting the communication between them and just
Thank you.
emotional processing in general.
Okay. So now let's go back to the scenario. One more time. The youth and his caregiver are involved in a verbal altercation that appears to be escalating. Both have started to use abusive language toward each other. The youth has stated the parent never listens, so he doesn't have to listen. And the caregiver is adamant that if he doesn't give him some respect, the youth will have to leave. What is your intervention? What is your intervention? These are all scenarios that come along all the time.
I think one of my first interventions would probably be to create some separation between the youth and the caregivers and then talk to them separately to see where the misunderstanding is happening between them.
All right. Thank you, Marley. Someone else.
And I agree with Marla too. And I think at the end, if possible, I would like to kind of come back and intervene again as a family and, kind of reassure the youth that like in the adults that we're all going to listen to each other. And while, I'm here, we're going to make sure that we're cool, calm and collected and we get to speak about this if that's a possibility.
If that's a possibility. Anybody else? What might be your intervention? How would we discuss about what we think is a good way to communicate with each other? Set ground rules for communication in the process of doing the work together?
I think modeling what listening looks like, right? You as a worker providing that so they both can see how you can model what understanding each other perspective looks like.
Yeah, I like the modeling. Thank you for that, Samara. Anyone else?
Kind of adding on to that, I like doing modeling skills in general. So, like, maybe that looks like using a fidget while talking to keep yourself grounded or regulated. And I'll do that while I'm talking with clients. Or maybe it looks like using skills in the middle of your conversation, and I'll model how to do that as well so that they get practice on using those.
Oh, that's a wonderful. Alexandra, you look like you were going to say something. I'm calling on you or no? Okay,
No.
because you look like you want to say something. Oh, okay. Anybody else? I'm asking these because we're sharing these with each other. What is something that you can do in that situation? How would we talk to the parent, the caregiver? What would we do with the caregiver? How would we support the caregiver in that situation? I'm always going to keep you in mind of the caregiver because we're doing interventions for youth. And we have to support the caregiver in the situation when we have a response.
Can you hear me?
No, I didn't. I'm sorry. Who was speaking?
It's Coco.
Okay,
We can hear
Coco,
you
I'm
now.
sorry. We're struggling.
Okay.
Go ahead, Coco. Go
Okay.
ahead. We hear you now.
I was gonna say, like, validating the parent in that, it can be hard to parent sometimes, and some skills, talking about skills that might be helpful in listening, or, like how to reframe your demands or, questions.
Mhm.
So
And I love, Coco, that you said validating the parent that this can be hard, because many times we don't validate parents, and it's in the validating that this is a hard situation, not only for them, but this might even be a hard situation for us. And so it makes the parent feel like they're not alone in the process. Okay, let's go to our third scenario. I'm going to give y'all these, give you something to do. This is part of the process. So let me go to the next one. A caregiver calls stating that her 16-year-old son returned home 8 hours late from school. And I put she. He is always hanging with negative peers. He appears under the influence of something, but does not appear to need to go to the emergency room. And his parents are extremely upset. He feels they're overreacting. Let's go back. What might be underneath what's going on? He didn't come home from school. He hung out with his peers. He appeared like he's under the influence of something. He doesn't need to go to the emergency room, but he doesn't understand why his parents are so stressed out. What may be going on?
It could be an attempt to escape, especially if he is doing if there's substance abuse. There could be other physical or mental illness, underlying physical or mental illness.
Thank you for going there.
Mhm.
Anybody else have anything else they would like to share?
Environmental, that being the friends and being outside, the influence from outside.
Okay. Could be the environment and the people where using might be something that his peers and others are doing on a regular basis. Okay, so now we looked and we said, maybe this is it. So let's go back and look at that story and talk about what would our intervention be when we go to the home. What would our intervention be? All these are situations that at one point or another you're going to come up with. What do we need to know about that peer? What would be some of the first questions we would, if we were having the discussion with the youth? What would we need to know? If you were with the youth and he came home and he looked like he was under the influence and he was late and he was hanging out with negative peers, what would be the first thing that you need to know after you ensure that he's in a safe place where he doesn't need to go to the emergency room?
I guess my head goes to finding out how old the peers are and how this person or how the youth knows the peers, if they're from school or from the community. I mean, if there's substance use involved, my head goes to maybe these individuals are older, and that's another risk factor that we would have to look into. But really big on rapport and trying to connect with the youth so that their guards don't go up. Trying to connect with them and like, oh, what does your friend group look like? What do you like to do for fun with your friends? Like, what does your perfect day look like when you're hanging out with your friends? Things like that.
Okay. Somebody else. What else is the first thing you need to know?
I would
guess as
ask
far as
why.
go ahead,
I'm sorry,
Luan.
Luan and Ashley went at the exact
Yeah.
same time. I don't know. So who wants to go first?
Go ahead,
You
Luan.
can go, Ashley. Okay. I would probably ask why. If he is under the influence, ensuring his safety, what he took and why he is taking it, and during those 8 hours, where he went and why. If it's, oh, I didn't want to come home. Okay, well, is there something going on at home? What's going on? Why do you want to come home? Just getting to those, okay, why are you, taking it? Is it recreational, or is it because you are looking to escape? Maybe something traumatic had happened to him that he did not share with anyone, and he's using it as a way to just suppress that.
Thank you, Luan. Go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, what Luan said, but the only other thing that I would add is um it really depends, what drug the youth took and how much they are under the influence. Because if they're, very intoxicated or whatever they took, you might not be able to get a proper assessment with them. So focusing more on getting information from the parents and then coming back tomorrow to talk with the youth. So I guess my intervention would really depend on how under the influence they are.
Okay. So again, the first question we need to know, Ashley, again, is what have they used? Okay. The question of why sometimes you will never get the answer to right away. And so it's about what is the use about? And who are the people that they're actually supporting, and what does he and his friends like to do? And sometimes getting that information, you have to start just like when Marley was talking about what do your friends like to do together, and it's a combination of knowing what the drug is first. We have to know that right off the bat, because knowing what he has used will actually drive how we respond to him in terms of the intervention. That would be where we need to start in terms of just learning about what's happening, what his environment is like. Is this his first experience with using drugs or not? Having those conversations. Real counseling sometimes cannot occur while somebody is under the influence. So I even like the idea that Ashley said, if he's safe, then maybe I need to have this conversation when he's sober. depending on how the parents are able to respond to it. So I just want us to be real mindful that it's kind of hard to really direct somebody when they're under the influence of drugs. It's about safety. It's about calming the parents down if this is a first experience for them. If it's a repeated experience from them, it's about learning what they feel the interactions and responses should be to the child's use. So we have to really work on that. It's also talking about who is their peer group and how long have they been involved. Those are the questions when we start talking about substance use, we have to get information about. But none of that happens without us actually developing rapport. Our last one for the day, and then we're going to be done. Let me go back. I love it because the last one is we're coming right up on our last one. The caregiver comes home unexpectedly and finds her teen alone with a friend in a compromising situation. The mother suspects sex was involved and is angry because the friend is of the same sex. What may be, let me go back here. What may be contributing to this crisis? And it might not be one of the ones that are here. So you might have to include your own. And it may be.
I'm gonna say not having a need met. If the youth is sneaking around to engage in these activities, it probably means that they don't feel understood by caregiver or feel safe and respected by caregiver to share those things. So that's where my head goes.
Okay, thank you. Great one. Anyone else?
I
One
think
that's not
maybe
listed. Oh, sorry. No, you could take it away.
I think maybe like a difference in cultural beliefs.
Thank you. That's the one I said. I forgot to put on there. Thank you. Cultural beliefs. Jackson, what were you going to say, or were you agreeing with Ashley?
I was going to say the exact same thing. Yep, cultural.
Yeah, that's why I looked and I said I forgot to put it on there. Anybody else?
I think at this point I would maybe focus more on the caregiver, their stability, just because like Ashley and Jackson said, it could be a cultural belief, it could be religious, it could be something else, but it seems more like it's the caregiver that is affected by the situation and not so much the youth, which, however, can play into the family conflict, knowing that, oh, the youth wasn't prepared, they weren't ready to come out, and now they've been caught in this compromising situation, and that's all been out in the open, and it's like also giving the youth the support they need and guiding them through that.
Thank you for that intervention. Anyone else? Do we have to have any safety concerns in this situation? What would the safety concerns be?
I was thinking about safety in a way that was it consensual or was it healthy in a way that was a teen have healthy sex education, maybe in that way. Are they being healthy? Are they practicing safe sex?
Okay. Any other safety concerns?
Did it mention how old the child was?
No, I did
They
not.
just say teen.
Teen. I just said
Yeah.
a teen.
Yeah.
So I put them in the teen years. Anyone else?
I think, yeah, the age also comes a lot because of the developmental, right? So developmentally, at what age are we, right? And what is the other person's age as well? Is it is it a minor or not?
Would ever there be a safety concern in the home? I see some nodding of heads because culturally, again, if a parent is very upset about their child being in a relationship that they I hate to say don't agree with, but the word I would say that they feel is going against their beliefs, that could also be something that we have to be concerned about in our response. So anybody else have something else we need to be mindful of in that situation? How about the relationship between the parent and child? Does that become a concern that we need to be mindful of? Okay, so we have to be mindful of that because you know what, again, going back to culture and going back to beliefs, religious beliefs or whatever, finding someone in a compromising situation can create a lot of challenges with communication, with able to be the ability to get along, and all those things have to come into factor into play when we're creating our interventions. So I'm looking at the time. It is 12:58. Any questions or comments before we move any further? No? Okay, then I guess we will see everybody at our next session. Thank you for
Yep, and
being
the next
involved.
session, yep, and the next session, I sent everybody the next 4 sessions. I think the first one is on March 5th. So we, as we have done, we do 1 week and then we take the next week off. So enjoy your next Tuesday off. So we don't have any training, but the next one is on March 5th.
All right, I'll see
Okay,
everybody
everyone.
around.
Yep.
Take care. Assad, feel better.
Thank you.
Feel better. All right.